Greetings, this is Willie Muhammad with National Network View. On tonight's show, Doshon Farad and Eric Muhammad will discuss the latest in the ongoing murder trial of Derek Chauvin, who's charged with murdering George Floyd. Later, our guests will discuss the events surrounding the tragic death of the hip hop legend DMX. Lastly, our guests will discuss whether or not the voter legislation that's being adopted across the United States is an effort to limit voting rights, or is it the new Jim Crow? But before we delve into those topics, brothers and sisters, let's take a moment to recap on some news stories that were covered last week by National Network View. On yesterday on I Have a Testimony, I had the chance to interview Arthur Reed about his personal story of transformation and his interactions with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. How has the guidance and how does the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan aid you in the work that you're doing?
Well, as you know, I've met with the minister several times. I've been blessed to get guidance from him personally. And one of those pictures that you had where I'm sitting there crying is me confessing to the minister, I'm with you 100%, brother minister, but I'm not as strong as I would like to be in certain areas, and that's one of the things that, that made me have the utmost love and respect for the minister. When the minister told me, he said, you're a great man, but you're going to be really, really great. And he said, man, Allah is patient. So work on yourself, continue to work on yourself because Allah has touched you. And I see those things happening every day.
Also, Brother Robert Muhammad spoke with Student Minister Patrick Muhammad regarding the current events in the Suez Canal and the supply chain disruptions.
How fragile is the American supply chain? And do you think more fissures or cracks will be discovered during the pandemic? And if so, could famine very well be one of them, and why?
Oh, yes. The writings are on the wall, and we are seeing it. We're actually living the scriptures. We're actually living prophecy. The book of Luke and the Bible talks about, and great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, in famines, in pestilences, in fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. And then Matthew, Jesus himself said, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. And he says this is the beginning of sorrows.
Tariq X spoke with NMV's reporter Nina Shabazz and Valerie Campbell about the law of attraction and sexual polarity.
Sure. Can you tell us what does the acronym VIBE stand for?
Right. VIBE stands for vision, intention, belief, and expectation. And it's a formula that I devised from my learnings and from my just understanding about how men and women relate to one another. And so it takes women on a journey. So the V is for vision, which basically teaches the woman how to look at herself in the right way, acknowledge what she's been indoctrinated with, what the world tells that she has about herself. So that's the vision. And then from that place, then setting an intention for how she wants to feel in a relationship. So for example, a lady might say to me, she wants a guy with washboard abs, and, tall, dark and handsome. And when you dig deep and say, well, why do you want that? It's because she wants to feel a particular way. I then deal with the beliefs, which is the limiting beliefs. And sometimes you can have beliefs that actually sabotage the relationship that you're in, or actually sabotage the type of man that you want to attract. Self-attraction works. Take out those beliefs that are sabotaging the relationship. It ends them in expectation and understanding that you're not going to lean on your understanding of how you think you're Mr. Right. That's what the VIBE formula is about.
Hassan Muhammad provided valuable information on establishing a budget, reducing spending on non-essential goods, and building wealth.
How can you use budgeting to start to build up wealth for you and your family?
Just very quickly, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but as we talked about that bottom line, that net operating income, if you have, let's say, an additional $1,000 a month on your net operating income, You and your family now can sit down and say, okay, what is it that we can do with $1,000? What can we either A, invest in, or B, buy and resell or make and produce with that 1,000 to turn it into 1,100? Even just turning it into 1,100. If you can do that every single month, you will be better than every single Wall Street investor that there is out there. That's a 10% gain. So yes, sir.
Patrick Oliver will read out loud and Readers and Writers event discuss reading and writing literacy programs to decrease the achievement gap of young Black boys.
What factors have led to these poor literacy outcomes among Blacks and Hispanics?
Lack of attention. Bottom line, when you send your children to schools, we taught somebody about somebody that doesn't look like them. What do we expect to happen? And that's what is happening. People that does not look like our children are teaching our children, and they are not giving them the best product necessary for them to become proficient. As a matter of fact, our children are born at genius level. We know this. We know this from just scientific research. We just know this from just being around our children. So when we send them to school for others to teach them, they're not going to teach our children or nurture their natural genius. They're going to give them just enough so they can possibly pass some standardized tests, so they can receive their federal dollars, whatever the case may be. But that's the first problem. And the other problem is they don't really understand, again, what nurtures Black children, Black boys' interests.
NMV contributor Brian E. Muhammad discussed the UN General Assembly's commemorative meeting acknowledging the victims of the transatlantic slave trade, the need for reparatory justice, and the ways the U.S. and European nations continue to benefit from slave labor, colonization, and stolen land.
In what ways has the U.S. and other European nations benefited from slave labor, benefited from colonization, and even stolen lands?
There's a book that the Nation of Islam research team put together called How the White Man Got So Rich. And then there's another book that was out for many years called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. See, these books are talking about the exploitation and how that was done. Now, when you look at slavery, the traditional slavery as we know it, or what happened to our people, if you take a land from our indigenous brothers and sisters, and then you go in Africa and you bring Africans and enslave Africans, and they work for free for 300 years, right? That will put you in a very good position financially if you're the enslaver.
Dr. Keeley updated us on the new strain of the COVID virus that is spreading across the United States, the new wave of COVID infections, and the benefits of the sun as a natural immune booster.
What has your research of this vaccine led you to conclude so far?
Well, public statements like that lady that we just heard are really, to me, statements that don't really have merit. Because for somebody to say that the vaccine is the reason why numbers are going down in the UK, there aren't any there is no evidence that can purport her claim. There was a downturn in most areas of the world outside of the United States before vaccines became available. The United States was really one of the few countries that were still on a high rise of the numbers. So to say that vaccines have caused a lower infection rate, I think is probably a little bordering on not telling the truth from my experience and research.
Sister Charlene Muhammad discussed how the freedom of speech is being denied to those who speak out against the dangers of the COVID vaccines, including Attorney Kennedy of the Children's Health Defense Organization.
Now, would you say that the government and the media are waging an attack on constitutional rights and freedoms of speech?
Well, yes, I will say what Attorney Robert F. Kennedy, who is the chair and he's the chief legal counsel for Children's Health Defense, has told me, as well as the another counsel with his organization, that this is definitely attack on freedom of speech. And once that's gone, then all of the other rights are stripped away. But how can you say that people who are voicing concerns, they say, critics argue, about what's injuring people? How can you say that they have no right to say that and shut out those voices? The ultimate end is, again, depopulation.
Nefa Freeman of the Black Alliance for Peace updated on the protests in Haiti, the intervention of the United States and Organizations of America states into the Haiti and other neo-colonized countries.
The Haitian people's right to national sovereignty must be respected. Is the Haitian president Jovenel Moise's refusal to step down disrespecting the Haitian people's right to sovereignty?
Well, I mean, absolutely it is. There's thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people in the street protesting Jovenel Moise. And so whenever the people aren't able to exercise and have what they want in terms of leadership, in terms of government, in terms of policies, then that means that they don't have any sovereignty. Not to mention the fact that the Jovenel Moise represents the interests of the West. He is like the person before him, Michel Martelly. They have been handpicked by the United States, by the U.S. pretty much, but all the Western powers, and so without, as long as the people can't get their choice in terms of being exercise democratic rights to voting on people, representatives, and policies, then that's a breach of the sovereignty of the people.
And as said in the beginning of the show, we have with us our brothers, Brother Doshon Farad and Brother Eric Muhammad, who will be here to discuss with us regarding the death of DMX. And also we're going to talk about, as said, the voting legislation and this current trial that's going on with Derek Chauvin. And we'll be right back to get into those topics right after this first break.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small but significant steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Many who love the hip-hop legend DMX were praying for him and stayed informed about his health status. DMX was admitted to the hospital on April the 2nd for what was reported as being a drug overdose. Ultimately, on April the 9th, our brother died. Joining us today to talk about the larger implications of our brother's current state of his death are our monthly contributors. And we'll get right into those questions after this clip.
Please, Lord, Jesus, man. Put your X's up. I love y'all niggas. I love y'all niggas. You ain't gonna see it like that. Keep it up. You'll never see it again like this.
According to the Addiction Center's website, quote, almost 21 million Americans have at least one addiction, yet only 10% of them receive treatment. And drug overdose deaths have more than tripled since the 1990s. So my first question, and I'll start with you, Brother Doshon, then we'll go to Brother Eric. DMX is one of the 21 million that are known to have addictions. Why do you think a country like America, that's considered to be a world power, it leads the world in addictions, according to a 2019 study?
Well, keep in mind, dear brother, as was said for decades, drugs is what keeps America running. If you were to get rid of drugs, you would have to fire law enforcement, you would have to fire DA agents, you would have to fire any type of law enforcement for the most part, because the high crime rate amongst those who either use drugs or deal drugs or smuggle drugs, if you would. Something that we have to look at too. It's very sad, you know, you don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you actually have to ask yourself the question, where would America be without drug use? Without drug addicts, if you would.
Wow, thank you. Brother Eric, what do you, so why would this world power, leader in democracy, also leads the world in addiction?
Well, you know, brother, first of all, it's an honor to be on NNB News and to see my brothers again. You know, the Quran says, when an unrighteous man brings you news, look carefully into it, lest you harm a people in ignorance and then be sorry for what you did. And I know the clip started out with saying that our brother died because of a heart attack with drug use. But there was another clip that also came out where a family member said that he took the vaccine, you know, a week earlier. Right. And then so now what happens is we start to run on certain things. But to go to your question, it's because, you know, America is what it is. It is a pharmaceutical company where it's only two countries, I can't think of the name right now, where you cannot market directly to the people. But America, as we turn on the television every day, we are seeing them market directly to the people these drugs, because they want to keep the people, especially Black people, you know, in a different state other than reaching our goal and being who God created us to be.
And that's one of the questions. Thank you for your response. And in addition to that, that was one of the other questions we were going to bring up in regards to, we know that it was first reported that he was admitted to the hospital because of a drug overdose. But then a family member, and of course people are still working to confirm it, says that he took the vaccine. And we've seen there was a young sister, she was a TV personality, 47 years of age. She took the vaccine, later died. Hagler, right? Hagler took the vaccine and he later died. Hank Aaron, and of course they've all, and it's been several cases like that. So in regards to, do you think that if it comes, do you think that that will be readily made known, or would they cover this up if it is true what the cousins, what the relatives said? I don't want to say cousin. What do you say about that, Brother Doshon?
Well, currently, I'm going to be honest with you. From everything that I've read, I've seen nothing from the family denying that they put out that statement that he took the vaccine. So you have to understand, when you're dealing with, as they refer to, mainstream media, it's no telling what you may hear. You have to go over everything with a fine-tooth comb. And this is where, you know, we have to research. We never take anything at face value. Research and read. And of course, you know, in media, we're always told to, you know, go after various sources, do thorough research. You know, I'm not just a journalist, but I'm also an investigative journalist. So I understand how information can be buried, and I understand how whistleblowers can be put in danger often, or how certain powerful news entities can cover the facts.
And with that, and your words made me think about one of the opening clips that we started off with Sister Charlene talking about the censorship around these this vaccine, or any information that's contrary to what is being pushed about it. So, Brother Eric, in regards to that, we how harmful is that? And we're still gonna talk about this addiction, because that's still a real issue as well in America. But how harmful is that they're censoring people who have opposing views as it relates to the vaccines?
You know, as another individual said earlier, and I think it was the same clip with Sister Charlene, when you're talking about, you know, denying one their First Amendment, you know, censoring them. It's very harmful. It's absolute death. So why did the founding fathers put that of the Constitution, make that the first, freedom of speech? So when you deny the person the freedom of speech, the freedom to express, you know, the freedom to respond, then it creates an environment of fear. It creates an environment of death. But I wanted to open up with that in the beginning, but you're right. We have to deal with the addiction that our people are suffering from.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, in one of the interviews that our brother did before he passed, DMX, he was on Talib Kweli's podcast. And this is something that DMX said, quote, he said, drugs were never a problem. Drugs were a symptom of a bigger problem. There were things I went through in my childhood where I just blocked it out, end of quote. So my next question is, what are some of the ways that mosques, churches, organizations can help those who are using substances or certain behaviors as a way to cover trauma that they have experienced? What are ways that these institutions in our community can help them? Starting with you, my brother Doshon.
Well, first of all, you know, we have to understand there's a difference between psychology and Black psychology. Many of our scholars, Naeem Akbar, Dr. Nathan Hare, Dr. Francis Cress-Hosing, so many others, so many prominent revolutionary Black scholars, Black thinking Black scholars have pointed out that the whole experience, Dr. George DeGroy have pointed out that the whole experience of slavery, Jim Crow, being under constant terror, the Tuskegee experiment, counterintelligence program, and now police terror on our community has produced in us a mental illness. And of course, W.E.B. Du Bois, he spoke about it earlier. He referred to us developing double consciousness. We develop a schizophrenic-like personality. We act one way when we're around Black people, another way when we're around white folks. So we have to understand, since our situation as so-called African Americans is very unique, keep in mind, what is considered to be an African American, we are a very new people. Minister Farrakhan, Imam Willie Muhammad, so many people have pointed this out, other nationalists. That's why you have the term New African. We are a new ethnicity. And this new ethnicity, not only do we dress and speak different and look different, but we think different. So with our religious institutions have to understand, and our civic organizations have to understand, it's important to have programs and therapists and therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists that within our community who understand that, and they can speak to us. They know, you know, there's a difference between the healing of our mentality, if you would, our minds, as opposed to everyone else.
Yes, sir. And Brother Eric, what's your take? Because I know you all are, outside of what you all are doing as the Mazda in Houston, you all also have a community organization that works to address this. So what could be done that will make people feel more comfortable opening up about their trauma for the purpose of it getting addressed?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And that's the role of faith. And that's also, as the executive director of Action CDC, you know, we go out in the community, right? And making people to know you, to feel you, to be with you and want to open up to you. Who wouldn't want to open up to a friend? If I don't know you, I'm not going to open up. So if you look at the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as taught by the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, we are out in the community. Everything that we do is out in the community. So I tell my case managers, it's not just about being on the phone. Well, of course, we're in the pandemic now, but I tell my case managers, it's about engaging the people, have them to open up to you, create friendship. Because at the end of the day, why do we call one another brother and sister? Because we are absolutely that. So when I go to an individual, I say, hey, my brother, how you doing, man? You know, they feel family. So it's about creating family among our people. And what that would do, it will open them up to want to express to you what's going on. Now, the question is, when they open up, are you going to be willing to address what they're saying, right? And then keep walking with them. One thing, last point, I love, Roxanne Shante, who grew up with DMX, she also spoke about the trauma in our community from a foster care perspective, right? And it's so important that we bring our children together. It's so important that we increase the love among our people and love among our children, and you would find both the adults and the children would definitely open up.
Yes, sir. And it's dealing still with this topic of addiction. When it comes to creating legislation to address this addiction crisis in America, we have seen less punitive methods to those who suffer who are white, right? But when it comes to blacks, we see a lack of compassion. We see a lack of a willingness to make government more responsible. When the opioid crisis started hitting white America, you saw this compassion. Let's be less punitive. And so my question is, Brother Doshon, we'll come to you. What should be our response as a black community, and what should be the response of black leadership when they're seeing that they're making the legislation less punitive for whites, but when it was for blacks, you didn't see that compassion? We were super predators.
For those, and you know, I'm glad you pointed that out, Brother Willie, because we definitely seen the concern of the opiate crisis for the past decade. And as a journalist, I can't tell you how many times that I've been contacted to do stories on the opiate crisis, interview this person dealing with the opiate crisis. And of course, this didn't become an issue until white kids in the suburbs begin to OD in particular. What I say is, those of us who believe in voting, this is where the term all politics are local comes in. We have to stay on our local city council people. We have to stay on our state representatives, our senators, and our Congress, and we have to form powerful voting blocks that hold these politicians accountable, these Democrats in particular, because of the fact that the Democratic Party is always coming to us. Just like we say we ought to make demands of those of us who are reparations advocates, when we say we ought to hold Democrats and other politicians accountable for getting us reparations, we ought to take the same position when it comes to legislation that deals with these unjust drug laws that that were actually brought about, of course, during the 1980s, as Reverend Jesse Jackson pointed out.
Yes, sir. And what do you say about that, Brother Eric?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We have, we talk about black consciousness, and our politics must be black consciousness, because we're absolutely talking about the depopulation. Why are they putting drugs in the community, right? These drugs don't come, we don't make the drugs here. They come from different places. We don't own the boats, all these things. We understand that, right? So we must, brothers, we must begin now to come together, unite, and organize ourselves, that we can begin to solve our own problems. This is why, again, the minister's putting out the lecture I want us to go listen to, is the criterion, and really understand what is going on with the vaccines, with the addictions, that it is to destroy and kill our people.
Thank you. And we're going to be pausing for our next break. Our brother Doshon won't be joining us for the last two segments, but we thank you for your commentary, my brother, and we'll pause for these brief announcements.
Brothers, it's always a pleasure joining you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes,
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the listen live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. As we renovate and restore the former home of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we have recycled the old copper gutters and downspouts and created a 1 ounce 39 millimeter coin made of 100% pure copper. Each coin is professionally graded and has its own barcode and registration number. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
America is now entering into the 4th week of the Derek Chauvin trial, the former officer who's being charged with the death of George Floyd.
This week, medical expert after expert drew this conclusion: George Floyd did not die because of drugs.
I believe the primary mechanism of death is asphyxia or low oxygen. There's no evidence to suggest he would have died that night, except for the interactions with law enforcement.
And today, highly anticipated testimony from the Hennepin County Medical Examiner, Dr. Andrew Baker, the only person to conduct an initial autopsy on Floyd.
I was aware that at least one video had gone viral on the internet, but I intentionally chose not to look at that until I had examined Mr. Floyd. I did not want to bias my exam by going in with any preconceived notions.
Baker determined that Floyd's cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest. In other words, that his heart and lungs stopped while he was being subdued, restrained, and compressed by police officers.
In my opinion, the law enforcement subdual, restraint, and the neck compression was just more than Mr. Floyd could take by virtue of those heart conditions.
The manner of Floyd's death, Baker found, was homicide, but the autopsy report did not mention asphyxia or lack of oxygen.
So we're back to talk about this. So, Brother Eric, before we get into the details and more discussion about this particular trial, on just the opening question, thus far, how would you rate the job of the prosecution?
Well, being a non-lawyer, it's interesting because the way I really look at it is that the municipality of Minnesota, before the trial, gave the Floyd family $27 million. And the way I'm looking at it is like they are looking out for their interests of their $27 million. Because can you imagine? And that's the way I see the trial is going. So can you imagine if they find him not guilty? You're talking about now, if the city erupts again, you're talking about possibly $1 billion or $1.3 billion destroying of the city, added on to that 27 million. So what they're doing is, to me, it's like they're working together, the prosecution, with respect to protecting what has already been given. Now we'll see how it ends, because as this edition of the Final Call says to us, is that we're under the shadow of death. So America has an opportunity. This case has an opportunity to give justice to the Floyd family.
Yeah, it's interesting. It made me think about a question I asked the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on Twitter regarding the trial related to police officers who murdered and maimed some family members of a family in the city of New Orleans after Katrina, and they ended up being convicted. But the minister said, Black people shouldn't celebrate too fast because they have a way of coming back and unraveling that, and that's just what they begin to start doing, lobbying for a reduction in sentences, appealing, right? So people were satisfied, hey, they were convicted, but then they still go to work to begin to start doing that. And as it relates to the prosecution, I thought they did, with the witnesses that they put forward, with the doctors, saying that, listen, man, countering what the defense is trying to say about, you made a good point. I want you to make this so our listeners and viewers can hear that. When the countering what the strategy by the defense to try to say his death was because of the drugs in the system. But you made a very good point about if that was the case, then this should have happened. Can you share that?
Yes, I actually said when we were in the back room that if that's the case, then he should have just walked out and collapsed and died, or drove off in the car and died, right? Mm-hmm. If he had nothing, if Derek Chauvin, Mr. Chauvin, had nothing to do with it. But what's also interesting is that look at the three charges. Now, I don't know, I'm not in Minnesota and I'm not an attorney, right? But I just thought these three charges were interesting. 2nd degree unintentional felony murder, right? 3rd degree depraved mind murder, and 2nd degree manslaughter. Now, there's a thing out there for us non-lawyers, a term that's called mens rea, MENSREA. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's a Latin term that means guilty mind. Well, hell, if you go read Francis Wellington's writings, if you read the writings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as we're taught, that's the nature of the Caucasian. So he has a depraved mind. That is his mind, right? And so that's very interesting because it refers to a state of mind required to convict a particular offender of a particular crime. So what was his state of mind is really where they're going at. Did he intentionally do it? Was it like with the case 10 miles away that happened to and may Allah be pleased with another one of our martyrs, young brother Dante Wright, who was just recently shot, getting back into the car, and the officer thought he drew his taser, but drew his gun and shot him, right? And then the police chief in the interview is like, hey, he made a mistake, right? So the minister is absolutely correct in that statement. So we shouldn't get too excited. And even if, he gets, Mr. Chauvin gets the highest charge, what does that even mean? Do we just go on and continue in the way that we continue, or do we continue to unite and organize ourselves and create a new reality for ourselves?
Because I think, and you mentioned this the last time you were here on the show, you talked about how the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan said how you can't train a reprobate mind, I think he said, right? And when you look at this, in the midst of this trial with Derek Chauvin, you have the young brother Dante Wright being killed. Then you have the lieutenant who's in the army, had his uniform on, but was still not given the decency and the respect for them to even answer his question of why are you stopping me, which is an indicator of a larger problem. And you mentioned the police chief in that town in Minnesota, how he was basically saying, I'm releasing this video, but you can tell that he was kind of saying that she responded according to how the training, how they're taught. And it leads to this next question, because there's an atmosphere amongst the police, this blue wall of silence, right? But we saw recently in this trial that took place, the police chief stood up on on the witness stand, where he basically said that what Chauvin did violated police policy, and now as a result of that, he is being, the cops, some of the cops I'm hearing that they don't like that. Could we be witnessing the beginning of a new era where more officers will begin to start coming forward against other officers who violate the rights of citizens, or even take their lives?
If it's in their best interest, the answer to that question is yes. But what did the Honorable Mr. Farrakhan say on the criterion about police unions? See, it's the culture. I was in a meeting with our student regional minister in Austin, and we were meeting with activists and police officers, the chief of police here, who's now in Miami, Chief Acevedo. And what was crossing my mind was the thought process of, are you here? My name is Acevedo, so he's Latino, right? Are you here as an officer, or are you here as a human being? Because if you're here as an officer, then you are going to defend your position. But if you're here as a human being that so happen to be an officer, right? Then why are we going back and forth, right? Because human beings, then that's what should be an agreement, right? That you can see what we're saying. We're not making this stuff up, right? This is the reality of what's going on. But it's those police unions. So the $27 million should not have come from the taxpayers. The $27 million should have come from the police unions fund or anything, or police unions pension, right? Anything that is connected to that will hurt, right, the officers that will create them. And I say hurt, I don't mean in a way that is
financially hurt their pockets.
We got to make that clear, right? What I mean by have an effect, let me use that word, have an effect on the police union and the police force, so that what you stated will happen. Because if you hit them in the pocket, as we said in the last segment, America is a corporation. It's about money. It's about business. And when you start hitting these police unions in the pocket, right, then at that point, then Brother Willie, I can definitely agree that they will start coming. But why aren't the black coming? Why aren't the black officers stepping up? Because they see themselves as blue than they do as black.
And that's the thing too, you know, with those, because I've talked to a black police officer who told me that he had to tell his son, be careful when these white police officers stop you. And I said, man, but that's the type of conversation that you don't need to just have with your son. You need to come out as a police officer and say this, because the guy in Virginia, even though he's in the military, he told the police officers, I'm afraid to get out of my vehicle. And their response to him was, well, you should be. And you mentioned something about the funding and the unions, and it brings to this question. I've been watching the coverage between CNN and Fox News, how they're dealing with the trial. CNN has it constantly rolling. Fox News touches it and keeps it moving. But what Fox News was focusing on, they were talking about the rise in violence in America. And they were trying to connect it to say, this is a result of them talking about defunding the police department. Correct. So from your perspective, is there a correlation between these efforts to defund the police department and this rise in violence in America?
No, it's absolutely not. And I say, I want y'all to watch this movie called Them. And I say, as they said on Them, the white man is the devil, right? It's beloved, it's who he is. It's his nature. And you create a system, right? And then now you have to police that system. And this is how they police that system. So no, to your answer, there is no connection between defunding the police and violence. They are who they are. They committed the violence and they still getting paid.
Definitely. And as we get ready to go to the break, I saw a news report. I'm not quoting it verbatim, but they were showing how one department may have got almost like $90 million. And when they were talking about defund, they only took about $5 million away from the budget. Like, come on, that's not defunding, but they use that as a way to want to keep those police in our community, because they know those police do just what Derek Chauvin is doing, just what the other guys did in Virginia, because they know that our tax dollars that we're using are meant to protect us from these, you know, they call us,
what
right?
What did the police officer say that shot Michael Brown? He murdered Michael Brown. He loved policing the black community because it's what? Fun.
Wow, think about that. And we see what happened as a result of that fun. So we're getting ready for our next break, and we'll be right back to discuss whether or not this Georgia law is the new Jim Crow.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds. Online education. Helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848. This week's headline for the Final Call cover story is entitled, Under the Shadow of Death. The trial of Derek Chauvin, the ex-police officer and accused murder of George Floyd, has begun. giving exposure to grief, loss, and the terror Black people continue to suffer with no guarantee of justice. This FCM Volume Number 27 edition features the middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the message to the Nubian Leadership Circle entitled Building a Nation of Our Own. To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call Cover Report.
In 43 states across the country, Republican lawmakers have proposed at least 250 laws that will limit mail, early in-person, and election day voting, with such constraints as stricter ID requirements, limited hours, or narrower eligibility for voter absentee, according to the data compiled as of February 19 by the nonpartisan Brennan Center for Justice.
The National Review's Rich Lowry writes this: "It's time to begin to think of invocations of Jim Crow in the contemporary debate as just as loathsome and self-discrediting as the Nazi charge. People who call anything in today's America the new Jim Crow are advertising their own lack of seriousness and ignorance of history, as well as, in many cases, their naked cynicism." Here is an example of what Rich Lowry writes about.
And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
The Senate Judiciary and Rules Committees have started their work responding to the concerted nationwide attack on voting rights of millions of Americans that we haven't seen since the era of Jim Crow.
I do absolutely agree that it's racist. It is a redux of Jim Crow in a suit and tie.
So as we get into this first, Brother Eric, I researched some stuff, and this comes from an article titled by the BBC.com, Georgia Voting Fact Checking Claims About the New Election Law. And I want to find something where they were talking about, I'll give you this with the ballot boxes, and you give me your thoughts on it. It says this: Democrats say that the new law reduces the number of these boxes, making it harder to vote. There will be fewer in the forthcoming elections, but this needs to be put in context. This is what the article is saying. Prior to the 2020 election, drop boxes weren't used in Georgia. They were brought in as part of the emergency COVID action. The new law does significantly reduce the number of drop boxes from the 2020 level. For example, Fulton County says it will go down from 38 to 8 drop boxes. The new law also means the boxes will be held in buildings and can only be assessed in hours that early voting is allowed, rather than 24 hours a day as was in 2020, end of quote. So from what you heard of this, how is this discriminatory? Or is it discriminatory?
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize. Absolutely. When you look at, and again, as I said the last time I was on, the Honorable Mr. Farrakhan said, attitudes when hardened become beliefs. From beliefs, we get laws. Right? The title of this is called Election Integrity Act of 2021, right? State Bill 202. Now, you mentioned 2020, right? Right? So now look what Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, they did a poll, and I know you love polls. They did a poll in April of 2020, a voter fraud study covering 20 years by MIT found that the level of fraud exceedingly rare, since it occurs only now look at this number, 0.0006, 0.4 zeros and a 6 of instances nationally. And in states, one state they found it was 0.0004. Right? So now about 5 times less likely than getting hit by lightning in the United States, according to MIT. Right? So now to your question, when you look at what they're saying, let's go to, it had to be why they're doing it. Right? Because if those are your numbers, why are you going to label it Election Integrity Act? Where is the lack of integrity? Right? Where in those numbers? What are your fraud numbers, right? So if you look at their fraud numbers, it would be consistent with what MIT found on a national level. You will find a consistency. So when you reduce your voting blocks or the boxes from 40 to 8, and you got to go in a building, and then, but they did it, why? Because of COVID. Well, now we had a section on dealing with COVID, a portion of, we talked about COVID. Now, when you look at it, COVID is on the rise with different strands. So you would rather an individual go in a building with 8 boxes to early vote, and now you're looking at risking the possibility of COVID, or you want to make it look like you're right. See, it doesn't add up. You can't tell me that it is, the law and its integrity, when at the same time you can find none, the lack of integrity you cannot find.
And so what you're saying in regards to with there's really no credible evidence to show any voter fraud. So what's the need for these sweeping across the country laws and new legislation, right?
Correct.
And we know, like, man, it's like Brother Dr. Wesley always said, the devil is in the details, and they'll give this umbrella of, hey, it's just this, but then they sneak in what they want to, how they want to do, and the different things that they want to do that will be able to have this impact. Let me say, here's another part that they say in regards, there's this thing about giving out food and water at the poll. So it says there's another one. There's criticism of a provision which bans some people from handing out food or water to voters within a certain distance of the polling sites, right? It's true that the rules on this have been tightened. This is the article. Republicans say the move limits potential interference before people cast their ballots. In previous elections, voting rights groups have often given out supplies to people standing in long lines at voting locations, which are the features of in U.S. elections. But what they're saying is that longer lines are common in Black populations. And so Republicans are claiming that they're pushing back, saying that this new law does not criminalize people for giving out water, but is basically just putting in restraints. It says that the law makes it an offense to give away food or water within 100 feet of a polling place or within 25 feet of any voting line. So what are your thoughts on that?
Again, it's asinine. It's political asinine, right? It makes no sense, right? So when a poll watcher comes, right, who's able to do it, right, who's able to give out the water, the poll watchers, right? But when you look at, again, what they're saying, and I sat in and did some poll watching, and I tell you that most people, I'm gonna say it like this, they're guarding their interests. What's really happening, what you're looking at, is when Donald Trump came in to make America great again, right? Now they got to protect that, because that's when Caucasian people feel like they could be Caucasian again, right? So now if you're looking at, who are they looking at? They're looking at the Florida governor now is the leading candidate, but they don't want Trump to run again, right? So what they're doing is solidifying to their base that we are doing something. Now, this is what's going on, right? So now in 2013, right, Texas had a bill called Senate Bill 14, right? Now, it was reinstated. It came in 2011, 2012 under former Governor Rick Perry, and then it was reinstated in 2013. But the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, stated that it was, in 2015, that it was a discriminatory against minorities, end of quote. Right? So what they're doing is, again, is leaning to their base to let their base know, hey, we are doing something. And yeah, the devil might be in the details, but the devil was also in the picture when Mr. Kemp was signing it. You had 7 white men, 3 on each side, but what was the picture behind them? It was an antebellum. It was an antebellum style portrait of the Wilkes plantation, right? In Wilkes County, Wilkes County, Georgia, right? So this is what you're looking at. No, all of that is a front. They know that
the real
the approval rating is like 8-9%, right? If you're in the government, especially Congress, and they're trying to find a way through the governors to solidify their base that we're doing something. You can be white in America again.
It makes me think about what the Holy Quran says, what Allah says in the Holy Quran when He talks about how, they'll submit evil and firm resolutions. Like, it sounds good. We want to protect voter fraud, but there's something that they're building because they know they've had some major losses in this past election, the presidential election, and even the other. So with that, what should be the response of Black people, Brother Eric, seeing these things?
Well, we have to develop our own third political force, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said. As Black people, we must come and have an understanding of a torchlight, right? We have to create our own politics, right? So it's you can't have a democracy and we be unintelligent. So you walk up to the polls, how many people are out there handing out their flyers? You mean to tell me you don't know who you're going to vote for before you get there? Right? We have to learn. We have to study. We have to see what's going on in our community and be active.
Brother, it's just a sad thing is that most of the times, man, most people are just going out there voting just because of what they saw a billboard, and they don't really know the details. But we thank you, my brother, and we look forward to you joining us again on the next time we have more discussions. So thank you for joining us. And we thank Brother Doshon as well, and we appreciate the commentary. Thank you all who are tuning in. Once again, make sure you subscribe to National Network View. Make sure you share. Make sure you comment. Leave your comments in the comment section. We want to hear what your thoughts are about this discussion as well. And this is your brother, Brother Willie Muhammad with National Network View.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.